Welcome to the Healthy Heart Show, where we pull back the curtain on conventional medicine and dive into the root causes of cardiovascular health. If you are concerned about high cholesterol, high blood pressure, heart attacks, stroke, or atrial fibrillation, this is the place for you. We will provide natural heart information that will help you prevent, treat, and reverse any ailment, leaving pills and procedures out of the picture. Here are your guides to holistic heart health, board-certified cardiologist and Amazon best-selling author, Dr. Jack Wolfson, and natural heart doctor, naturopathic physician, Dr. Lauren Latanza.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jack Wolfson, board-certified cardiologist, and welcome to another episode of the Healthy Heart Show. This is your home for the 100-year heart. Again, I'm cardiologist Jack Wolfson, and my brand is Natural Heart Doctor. The company's Natural Heart Doctor, and this is our show, the Healthy Heart Show, where we have the best guests in the world to be able to give you the best heart health information. And don't forget that what we do is that as we talk about a whole variety of topics, it kind of always comes back to heart health and wellness. So whatever it may be, if we're talking about environmental toxins or pollutants, or we're talking about supplements, or we're talking about mind, body, and spirituality, again, it always goes back to heart health. And that's why I'm proud to introduce Dr. Stephanie Estima. Dr. Stephanie, how are you?
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me, Doc.
All right. Well, if you don't know Dr. Stephanie, again, you really need to. She is changing so many lives and helping so many people with her new book, The Betty Body, and we'll talk about that. And it's doing so well on Amazon, hundreds of reviews. People are loving it, the accolades. And again, a lot of the doctors in the community as well are really kind of backing up Dr. Stephanie's book. So we'll dive into that. Dr. Stephanie is a doctor of chiropractic with a special interest in metabolism, body composition, functional neurology, and female physiology. So I think for the people on this podcast that are young women, they're going to get a lot of great information, but even the older women and men who are listening as well, who live with these women, they're going to learn some fantastic information. And Dr. Stephanie's been all over mainstream media, just millions of reads on medium.com, Thrive Global, Huffington Post. She is the creator of the Estima diet, so she'll tell us about that as well. And I think she's got some fantastic opinions as it comes towards raising children, which she has too, living up in Canada, and about maybe some of these issues about sex, intimacy, longevity, but also kind of being that mom as well. So she is totally backed up by science. And if you know me, I love quoting science. I love showing information about, right out of the medical literature. So anyways, again, Dr. Stephanie, thank you for being here. Let me dive into this right now. As far as, let's talk about women and stress and what's happening right now in the last year and a half during this pandemic. What's your pulse on what's happening with women and their stress load, and what are the problems with it?
Oh, man. Well, I would say that this has been such a poignant time, I think, in human history, but I think in particular, because I tend to see a lot of females, both in my communities and in my private clients that I coach, seeing a lot of stress. So of course, there has been the stress of uncertainty, which I think is not just a female problem. I think it's a male and female problem, where we've been locked down and then we've been opened again, and then locked down and then opened again. And can business, what's considered essential? What's considered non-essential? There's been a lot of, I think, destruction of financial wealth for many people. And I think for women in particular, what I've noticed is a lot of change in menstrual cycle patterns. So we will, what I've noticed in my communities is women will be reporting that their menstrual cycle length is changing. The quality of their bleed is changing. It's less predictable. So if they were like a 29 kind of, day girl, where they would get their cycle every, 29 days, and they sort of knew what to expect, we're seeing some variances there in terms of what they can expect in terms of the length and the quality of their bleed. And that's to be expected. When one of the things that I talk about in the Betty Body is that your menstrual cycle is basically your hormonal report card. It is telling you how well you are doing with dealing with the internal and external demands or stressors in your life. So And I think you can, and I'm happy to talk about my own experience, but just in the last year and a half, I've also pulled my own children out of, they were in schools and they were mandating that they had to wear masks. And whether or not this is not a comment on, your beliefs, but I really felt it was important for my children to be able to see faces in terms of their language acquisition, in terms of, I didn't want them learning that people are dirty and not to be shared. They can't share pencils or swap lunches or, whatever things, kids do. So I pulled them out of school system, and I've been homeschooling them myself for the past, at least for the past, 18 months, I would say. They were in the private school, sort of when the first lockdowns happened. And then after that, we pulled them. So this is their second year where mama is their teacher. And yes, it's been extra stressful because at the beginning, and I would say still, totally unqualified teacher, but know my children very well, and was able to very quickly adapt to their needs. So yeah, I would say that there is a lot of stress for women in particular, because I think, we have this very delicate cadence, this very delicate rhythm that is exquisitely sensitive to changes in our environment, whether that's food changes, whether it's stress changes. So seeing changes in the menstrual cycle, seeing a lot of sleep disturbances. And then of course, when you add on, if you are a mother, worrying about, your child's, whether they're falling behind in school, or whether, what you're going to do with them, you're going to pull them out, you're going to homeschool them, you're going to change schools, whatever you're going to do. I think it's been really stressful for everyone.
Well, let me say this is that I will take issue with what you said as far as like you being not qualified. You are 1000% qualified. You are more qualified than anybody, of course, to raise your children because you're their mother, but also because of your knowledge and beliefs about what is really important. And we've done the same thing as well. We pulled our two oldest ones out of school. My wife never wanted to send them to school in the first place. And then our younger, two, they were never going to go to school. So this kind of worked out perfectly for us as like that just great excuse to keep them at home. And really it's about having fun, and it's about just letting kids be kids, being part of this tribal, society, trying to find other kids that are of the same, background. And maybe you can, touch into that as kind of like how you have found others in your area, maybe to commiserate with, if you will, and to hang out with. And again, because I at this point, I could care less if my children learn about algebra or trigonometry, or about Greek mythology, or about the Civil War. Like I don't care about that, and especially that's somebody else's version of history anyways. Who knows what the reality is, especially seeing what the government can do to reframe the rhetoric in the 21st century. Imagine what can be done historically. So again, it's all I think about finding your tribe. And I know you've created a fantastic tribe in your business profession with women, obviously, that are really really embracing a lot of your philosophies and seeing you as kind of like that guide to help them along, because it's a pretty crazy world. So tell me, how are you finding as far as like the kids in the area and dealing with the homeschool, unschool, if you will?
Yeah, I would. And I'll say that that's, me being very hard on myself, because I think my most important role is a mother to my sons. So what we've done a lot of things. So we've really prioritized play dates. We have a lot of time in nature. So we will often go for walks, and they'll, pick up things like, what's this pine cone? And we take the pine cone home and we do a little study project on it. I have, a network of other mothers who may not necessarily have pulled their children out of school, but are really concerned about the unfold, like the sort of, we'll call it just mandatory coercion that may be happening to our children. So we've prioritized play dates with family members, with friends who have similar, philosophical premises that we do. And they're also enrolled in group activities. So both my children love soccer. They're both in rep soccer. So they have 4 times a week that they're going to play soccer. So they also have that, a lot of times the big the argument around homeschooling is, oh, they're going to be awkward. They're not going to be socialized. They're not going to, and I would argue potentially, and with love, that it's more awkward for a child to be taught that collaboration is dirty and that you can't share things during the day. So I think that, sitting behind a mask with not being able to see your teacher's face or her facial expressions or his facial expressions, I think is one way to guarantee awkwardness. So we prioritize extracurricular activities like soccer, and then there's a lot of play dates in the family, and of course the family all knows our views on masking and things like that. And I have a network of women. A lot of them are chiropractors who also have a very similar premise to me in terms of natural immunity and health and healing.
Yeah, to me, I mean, children wearing masks is nothing short of child abuse. That's all there is to it. Makes me absolutely sick to even think about it. And our children have never worn masks, and they're never going to. And let me help out the women who listen to this podcast that are postmenopausal. Let me focus on them, because I guess in my mind of this kind of utopia, human utopia that existed before the agricultural revolution. Let's just say it's 15,000 years ago, and I'm a 50-year-old woman, and I no longer menstruate. I no longer have my monthly menses, and I go through this change, this menopausal, change, and I go through it really like without symptoms. I feel fine. I feel fantastic. I don't need female hormones. I don't need to go to the doctor. I don't suffer from all these hot flashes. I guess that's my view of how things were historically. Maybe you can tell us kind of how things are now. And then as we dive into some strategies that you use successfully to help women deal with these perimenopausal symptoms.
Sure. Yeah. I think that first I'll say that everything exists on a continuum. So often I'll have women who will come in and say, all of a sudden I can't sleep, and all of a sudden I have hot flashes, and all of a sudden I have, I can't lose weight no matter what I do. And I would say that that's physiologically impossible. It doesn't you don't just wake up one day with dysfunction or hormonal derangement. This is something that happens over the course of a long period of time, where it snowballs and snowballs to the point where your sleep is disturbed enough that you can no longer sleep for the required 8 or 9 hours, that you are now having such a sluggish liver that now you are experiencing some of these hot flashes and whatnot. So I think one of the problems that we see in modern day life is that, and contrasting that to a woman who, even honestly, 50 years ago, we don't have to go back to our Paleolithic mothers and foremothers. We can talk about this in terms of the 1960s and the 1970s. There was a lot more general movement. There was a lot more exposure to sunlight. There was, we didn't have our heads buried in our phones and our computers all day long. I like to lovingly call it, I just sit and I talk to my computer all day long. I'm on meetings like this. I'm on Zoom. I'm just talking to my computer. We didn't really see that. Like children, when they were raised in the 60s, like I'm a baby of the 70s. My mother would say to me, you go and bike, like go and play with your friends, and you don't come back in until the lights come on. So that was like the street lights. When the street lights came on, that was when I was allowed to come back home. So, and you usually had dinner with the family, et cetera, et cetera. So I think things have really changed even in the past, like 40 to 50 years, where we spend most of our time under artificial light. We're not getting natural sunlight. And we could go on a whole geeky magic carpet ride in terms of what natural sunlight does to your ability to metabolize fat, your circadian rhythm, your stress levels. Like this is such an important, often overlooked piece to regular cadence. And again, when we think about some of the neuromusculoskeletal derangement that can happen, I mean, I was in physical practice for 16, almost 17 years before I went completely online. And I was seeing 7-year-olds with issues in their neck because they were just like on their little, Nintendo Switches and all their little things. So we were already seeing structural changes in the neck. And, again, we can get into how that might put some tension on the sheath around that surrounds the central nervous system that is protected by the spine, and some of the other derangements that can happen in terms of activation of the brain. But so these things are all happening to our children. They're happening to us. And the other thing I'll say as well is, we had a lot more general movement. We were much more what I would call movement generalists. Whereas now I feel like we've moved into this like movement specialty. So you'll see this very much in like CrossFit gyms. You'll see this where like a woman might get up and she'll do her Peloton workout for an hour or her online class, and then she sits for the rest of the day. So she has this hour or so where there's very specialized movement where she's moving, which is great. That's amazing. But then there's just no other activity during the day. Like she sits and she talks to her computer for the rest of the day, right? Or she's working on her computer. And I think that these are some of the big changes that can lead to this amplification of the stress response. So one of the things that I often see, particularly with women, because we've been told that we need to be skinny, we've been told we need to look a certain way for our entire lives, is that they do way too much cardio. So you always have this like stress response that's happening. They're not lifting enough weights and they don't have enough generalized movement through the day. I mean, our, foremothers and forefathers, if you will, used to get somewhere between 20,000 to 25,000 steps naturally in a day because they were just tending to the children, going to hunt and, gather food and preparing the food and all of these different things. And, if you are someone who has access to a wearable, like an Oura Ring or a Fitbit or a Whoop or whatever, you'll probably notice that there's no way that you get to 25,000 steps on a consistent basis. And our brains require that. Our hormones require that. We are designed to have this low level. This is why we have different muscle fiber types, so that we can have this low level oxidative type of movement throughout the day without becoming tired. So those are some of the things that I see that affect, I think they affect men and women. But again, women are exquisitely sensitive when we have been sitting at our desk for decades, when we've been, there's a meme that I thought was quite clever. It was something like, we sit under artificial, lights. We put our sunglasses on when we go outside to protect ourselves from the sunlight, but then we get back on our devices at night, so it's like you've just completely switched the input to the brain, where you're protecting yourself from the bad sun. When you go outside, you're slathering yourself in sunscreen, which has its own, we can talk about like the endocrine disrupting cascade that might induce, but you're also not doing the things that you are innately designed to do, which is move and rest and get natural sunlight and move your head back. Like you're not just in this like sagittal plane all the time, that you're actually looking to the left and the right, and you're looking up and you're, so that's my long spiel to answer your question. I don't know if I answered it in the way that you wanted me to, but that's what I see.
No, that was, fantastic. And I think you're right. It's that, and those of us, pretty much everybody's living on their computers, these days. And unfortunately, I'll speak for myself. I'm not much different in the sense that so much of my existence, is done virtually. I love seeing people in person. I love doing in-person consultations, in my office in Arizona. But again, the way the world is kind of moving, unfortunately, it's moving in this direction. I think that's why we see so many health issues. But I think you paint the picture very clearly again, that these menopausal symptoms that women are suffering from, they're just man-made, if you will, or human-made, that it's not supposed to be that way. It has to do with the input from nutrition, from your sleep, from your sun exposure, from your physical activity, and all these environmental toxin stressors that play a role. So maybe let's dive into this. Tell me more and tell the audience really about the Estima diet and kind of, how we can use that to recover all the things we'd like to really live our optimal life. How can we use your nutrition plan?
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things I didn't mention before is nutrition. Like now, when we look in our modern day world, nutrition is just a little Uber Eats order away, right? We can Uber Eats something, and we have some type of food that's delivered to our house in like 30 minutes or so, right? Or you have these processed foods that you can find in the freezer section of your grocer. You nuke it in the microwave for however many minutes, and you have we'll call it a meal, but I'm going to put meal in in quotation marks. So the Estima diet was really born out of my own experiences. I am, as you mentioned, chiropractor. So seeing a lot of women, seeing a lot of men and women in practice and doing a lot of body work, but my own personal struggles with my own menstrual cycle. So I spent years, unbeknownst to me, but I was estrogen dominant. So I had a really difficult time with, especially around the onset of my bleed week. So a lot of heavy bleeding, a lot of cramping, a lot of pain. Even the week leading up to my period, lots of emotional distress. I was having to medicate in order to deal with the symptoms, not actually realizing that my symptoms were just my body's way of talking to me to say, hey girl, like you're pushing yourself too hard. Like, let's just put the brakes on a little bit. And so it was born out of my own story. And then I was also noticing I was running a nutrition program in the clinic at the time. It was a ketogenic diet. And I was already seeing a difference in outcome between my male and my female patients. So it was especially when they were married and they signed up for it. It would be like the guy would walk in like a week or two later and he'd be like, doc, this is the best. Like I've done down 16 pounds. I feel great. I'm sleeping through the night. My energy's through the roof. And then, the woman would sort of be dragging her feet, behind him and be like, I hate this. Like we're eating the same stuff. And I've dropped like a pound, maybe 2 pounds. What's the deal? So I really became interested in what were some of the differences between men and women when we look at outcomes in diet. And as I've said a couple of times, women are exquisitely sensitive to changes in their environment. So when you look at even just if we just kind of zoom in on the ovaries for a moment, the density of mitochondria in the ovaries far surpasses the mitochondria in any other major organ. So in the oocyte, in the ovary, there's about 100,000 mitochondria per cell in the ovary. When you look at the heart, for example, it's around 5,000 mitochondria per myocyte. You look at the liver, there's about 2,000 mitochondria per hepatocyte. I mean, that is just an extraordinary orders of magnitude. It's like women have these little eyes, that don't, it's like they're always like sensing what's going on. So when you aggressively restrict, for example, carbohydrates for too long, which is what a classic ketogenic diet will do, we will start to see changes often in her thyroid function, which is very important in terms of metabolism. We will start to see higher levels of reverse T3. Her inactive T4 requires insulin to convert that to T3. So we will start to see changes in her thyroid function, which will preclude her from losing the weight, because thyroid, one of the major functions of the thyroid is to actually help the substrate get into the cell, much like insulin, to help the cell do its thing. So I started playing around with instead, and I'll, in the spirit of, transparency and honesty, like I was running the ketogenic diet like it was kind of just like all the men that I was looking up to at the time, right? So it's like, you can have as much bacon as you want. It's like bacon, butter, burgers, and repeat, right? So we started changing the way that the diet was constructed. So instead of, instead of it being some of these, what I would call more, dirty foods that have a lot of the, the processing to them, or the chemicals to them, we started looking at, if you were to sort of look at your plate from like a bird's eye view, if we could fill the base of the plate with green leafy vegetables, or if you could, if you couldn't measure it, let's say you didn't have a weight, if you were to look at your hand, right, like that's about a cup of vegetables. Could you put 2 of those cups on your plate? And then, your protein, can your protein be about the size of your palm? And then, the fat, maybe it's like about the equivalent of your thumb, that's the fill, right? So you fill that up. And once we started switching over to more of a green leafy vegetable base, and once we started adding in something called resistant starches, which we may get to today or not, I started noticing huge changes in outcome. So green leafy vegetables, um, very dense in fiber, which is of course very important for your bowels, right? So the roughage kind of cleans out a lot of the kind of the debris, if you will, in the intestinal lumen, as well as, of course, bulking up the stool. So as it's going through the intestinal lumen, and you have fiber, you're attracting more water to the developing bowel movement, and of course, it makes it easier to pass. And then, of course, there's compounds in it like sulforaphanes, which are really healthy for estrogen metabolism. They're really healthy for the estrobolome, and then we added in resistant starches, which are also really important for cravings. Because this was the thing with my ladies. My ladies could do any type of keto for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then they're like, I don't care how much fat you give me. I just want carbs. Like, I just want pizza and a bagel, and I'm going to have it right now. But when you gave them the resistant starches, which just as a little, I'll give you like a little kind of quick and dirty in terms of what they are. They're not broken down in your small intestine. They're actually food for the large intestine, for the colonocytes. And then, I mean, I'm speaking to the choir, of course, I know you know this, but for your audience, these colonocytes now will produce a short chain fatty acid called butyrate. And butyrate is going to help quell your cravings. It's going to help with any hyperpermeability that you may, like if you are someone who has a lot of distension or a leaky gut, it helps to heal that. And of course, it deepens your state of ketosis. So once we started adding those two pieces in for my ladies, this was kind of like the magic bullet. So instead of them feeling like they were constantly hungry and constantly craving, this was the thing that allowed them to adhere to the first phase of that program. And then with time, we can get into this as well, but I wanted to give you a pause for you to be able to make some comments as we started developing a cyclical keto approach for women as well, because I don't, contrary to what many people think in sort of the keto world, I don't think women should be in ketosis forever. I don't think we were designed that way. I think it affects our fertility, which is, again, whether or not you want to be pregnant, your mitochondria and your ovaries are looking to optimize for your fertility. So we want to be, especially for women in their reproductive years, we want to be thinking about how can we optimize for your fertility, because that is a measure of your vitality.
The Healthy Heart Show will be right back after we take this quick break to hear from our sponsor. Would you like to drink great tasting coffee that's also good for your heart health? Cardiology Coffee is your answer. This 5-star rated coffee is delicious. It's a gourmet coffee that begins with whole organic beans, hand-selected and carefully roasted. It's tested and certified to be free of pesticides, mold, and other toxins. Cardiology Coffee is great for your heart, and you're going to love how it tastes. Order now online at cardiologycoffee.com. Now back to the Healthy Heart Show.
And I think, what's great about you, obviously, is that you've got so much real world experience, with people. And really it's understanding certainly it's not one size fits all. I certainly have seen so many times where the men, whatever diet they're on, like the men seem to like lose weight tremendously fast. And the women, again, it is that struggle. So, again, I think, your book really just highlights so many of those different things. Tell me, again, we can argue about, the best diets and stuff like that. I am the paleocardiologist. Ultimately, I believe in the hunter-gatherer, diet and nutritional lifestyle. But tell me how important it is to eat clean food and all of these chemical additives that are in the vast majority of people's diets. What does that do to their hormones? What does it do? What kind of signal does that send to the ovaries? What does it do, again, for, these menopausal symptoms that women will struggle with?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said around when we can prioritize eating foods, I would say eating whole foods. So as much as you're able to shop the perimeter of your grocery store, right? So this is where you'll find the meats and this is where you'll find the veg. These are some of the places that you should be shopping. It's really in the aisles of the grocery store that you'll typically find more of these processed foods that you're referring to. And there's a lot of discussion around the long-term effects of some of these processed foods. I think that the answer here is that a lot of it will destroy the gut microbiome, particularly when you are eating foods that have emulsifiers. So an emulsifier, you probably already use one, like shampoo, right? Shampoo is an emulsifier. When you shampoo your hair, you're basically using the emulsifier to take the grease, if you will, out of your hair. And so the same is true for things like protein bars and, cookies and chips and crackers. They use a lot of emulsifiers in order to mix the fat and the carbohydrates, right? If you were to put oil in water, I mean, this is like a high school test, right? We know that oil and water don't mix, but when you emulsify, when you add an emulsification agent to it, like soy lecithin, for example, this is going to allow those two things to mix. And what we know specifically around processed foods and the use of emulsification agents or emulsifying agents is that it actually destroys a lot of the microbiome. So a lot of the sensors in the microbiome that will speak to the brain that will tell you that you're full. A lot of these receptors, when you're consuming some of these emulsifying agents, will actually retreat further into the gut mucosa, so that it actually takes more calories for those receptors to be activated. So what ends up happening is, of course, we feel hungrier, we don't feel full, and then it's messing up that gut-brain axis, which is really, really important for satiety and your microbiome. I mean, as much as we like to think that we're human, I think that we're just, sort of a collection of human cells that are carrying around these bacteria, because there are much more bacteria much more bacterial DNA that we carry than we carry human DNA. So we really want to be conscious of optimizing for our microbiome. So that would be one of the more obvious things that I see where, you have and we all had, I'm not saying like never had, like I have a protein bar here and there as well. But it doesn't make you feel full. Like if you had the equivalent amount of calories in, let's say, a salad or a steak and some asparagus or something, like steak and veg, you feel the satiety signals that you get from eating whole foods is always going to be higher than, if you have a protein bar that, let's say, has 20 grams or 30 grams of protein and such amount of carbohydrates. Like you don't feel as full because the nutrient density, it's so dense and it's such a small volume of food. We often go back for more. So I would say that there's something to be said about consuming whole foods, especially the green, like I'll come back to the green leafy vegetables, because you'll usually get a larger volume of food. You'll have like nutrient density in terms of the micromineral and the phytonutrient content in there, but the volume is also important. So as your stomach, slightly stretches because you've had that bigger volume of food, that's also a signal to the brain to say, hey, I've had a lot of food here. Let's start releasing a hormone called leptin, which basically tells us, put the fork down. We've had enough food here.
Yeah, I think you're highlighting obviously your level of understanding and reading and education on these topics, and I think again you're a fantastic teacher to your two boys. Like they just got to listen to you go on a rant, and I'm sure they hear it 24/7.
They do,
which is absolutely critical. Because people, I'm sure you've had so many moms ask you, right? How do we get our kids to eat this way, to live this way? They're glued on technology, or maybe they don't want to go outside, or again, they don't want to go to sleep. And I mean, again, they certainly don't want to eat these foods. And really it starts with us to be able to educate. First of all, we have to lead by example. That's always the first and most important thing. And then number two, to be able to educate our children, like, this is why we do this. This is why we live this way. And I think that's what parents need to do. And certainly they would be much better served if they were learning these principles about health and wellness than about, Greek, mythology and the Roman Empire and so on and so forth. So I appreciate all that. Yeah, you talk about resistant starch. I love potatoes, which I think I throw that into the hunter-gatherer category, because I know that those potatoes would be out in the world. I know we'd come across them. I know they would enter the fire that we've been cooking with for hundreds of thousands of years. So I'm cool
And
on
they're hardy
potatoes.
and they're easy to grow in a variety of different environments, and they're cheap, which would be something that you'd also, if you're looking at a sort of a Paleolithic, or, whether something would fit the bill, it's like, can this grow basically anywhere? Yes. And when you have cooled potatoes, for example, or even if you were to just look at a raw potato, very high resistant starch content. Now, of course, most people are going to say, well, I don't want to eat a raw potato. So you might cook it, and then you would cool it. So you might have the potato, you might put it in the fridge overnight, let's say, and then take it and I do this with rice actually. So rice is another example of a very much a resistant starch. When you heat it, you start to cleave, you start to not make it a resistant starch, essentially. You make it as a digestible starch. But when you put it back in the fridge, some of those bonds begin to crystallize again, and you get some of that resistant starch content back. So I really like to do this with cold potatoes and cold rice. So you can take some cold rice out of the fridge, a little bit of MCT or olive oil, some salt, and it's just a beautiful snack. Another really nice source of resistant starches that I often will recommend for women to start with is green banana flour. So you can have a green banana as well. And if anyone, right now there are like 2 bunches of bananas that are turning brown. So I'm going to put them in my dehydrator and make them banana chips. But typically a banana, if you buy it from the store, it's often green, high resistant starch content. As it sits on the counter for a couple of days, you'll notice that the green turns to yellow. You might get a few brown spots. That is basically the resistant starches being destroyed. And this is why bananas have a very high sugar content. So you can have the green banana itself or a green banana flour. So this is something that you can find pretty much in any grocer. I've had some people who are like, this is not in my, like I don't have this in my local grocer. You can find it online, at online retailers. So green banana and green plantain flour, very good. To your point around potatoes, you can also use raw potato starch as well, which you'll find in any baking section in any grocer, because you usually use raw potato starch as like a thickener. If you want an alternative to cornstarch, raw potato starch is a really nice thickener for sauces. So you can have that. And I usually will incorporate those into a smoothie, into a shake. So if I'm having like a protein shake or whatever, a little dollop of green banana flour gives it a bit of a banana taste, and it's all good.
Yeah, definitely. There is this online retailer that maybe our audience has heard of, and you've heard of. I think that it's named after this river in South America. Oh, it's called Amazon, and Amazon, right, delivers everything to your doorstep, including green banana flour, organic green banana flour. We love to add that to whatever we would bake. If I'm making some kind of paleo pancakes or muffins and stuff like that, it's a good thing to add in there as a good form of resistant starch. And maybe that's I guess that stems me into thinking about sushi, right? Because if you do sushi, again, there's so many things they would add to it, but you can do it at home and make your own sushi. Or even what we'll do is we'll just do like a rice bowl, and then we'll put the raw fish on top of it, and coconut aminos and some avocado and ginger and other stuff. But again, that's that cold rice as opposed to the hot rice, and now you've brought back that resistant starch.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of places that you order sushi from, they'll put sugar in the rice to make it sticky. So I like making the sushi at home. That's probably the best way to avoid that as well.
Yes. All right. So I know you're big into fasting as well. So tell me some of the differences. Again, like the men they fast, the weight falls off.
Yes.
And for those of us that recommend it, it's like frustrating for us doctors who like why are the women struggling with this? Why isn't it making a difference? So Dr. Stephanie Estima, tell me, why do women sometimes struggle with fasting as far as, or at least getting the results during the fast?
Yeah, I would say that it comes back to, when we look at some of the main differences between men and women, one of the biggest differences is our difference in testosterone. So, Dr. Sarah Gottfried will talk about this testosterone advantage. And I love that name because even though women, we phenotypically think of, oh, woman, more estrogen. And yes, we have more estrogen, but we actually have more testosterone than we have estrogen. But when we compare the female's level of testosterone to a male's level of testosterone, we're talking like 10, 20, 30 times more a male's concentration of testosterone versus a female's. And so when a man fasts, he has naturally, and because under the influence of under the influence of this testosterone, he's naturally going to have more lean muscle mass. His bone density is going to be, heavier than, his female counterpart. So fasting is going to be much easier for a man. We will also, for women, we typically see women, especially in modern life, because we're trying to balance raising children and having a career. And, and I can say that this is, even true for me as well. Like the brunt of the caregiving often falls on the mother, right? It's like the kids, when they have a sniffly nose or they have a nightmare, they don't go to dad, they come to me, right? They want mommy to hug them. They want mommy to, to help them with their homework, or mommy to take them to soccer practice or whatever. So it's often that we have a higher level of stress than our male counterparts do. And we don't, so when you add in another stress like fasting, so fasting is just like exercise, it would be something that I would call a hormetic stress, which is a eustress. It is a good type of stress. But if you already add that to a really taxed system, it is going to, and especially if you're too aggressive with it, a lot of women, when they say, hey, you know what, I want to lose weight, I'm going to do like a 16-8, or I'm going to do like a 24-hour fast, your body, back to those like invisible eyes, the mitochondria in your ovaries are like, you know what, girl, like there's not a lot of food here. Like you haven't eaten in the last 18 hours. We should probably shut down your menstrual cycle, because if you were to get pregnant right now, this will be bad news bears. So we're just going to shut it down this month, and maybe next month we'll try again. So when you aggressively fast, you will necessarily affect your ability to ovulate, which is actually the point of your menstrual cycle, not to bleed, it's to ovulate. And you are going to affect your fertility, which is what again, back to this idea of like, this is what we should be optimizing for. So for women, you can still fast because there's still a lot of benefits to fasting. You can reduce your insulin levels. You can help, augment your growth hormone. There's all of these different, like you can induce autophagy, all of these different things that fasting can do. But as women, we have to be gentler. So we don't want to do these 18-6s or these OMADs or these 3-day or 7-day fasts like the guys can do. We want to be much gentler. And I would say that as a through line for any health practice, you don't want your health practice to feel punitive, right? You don't want it to feel like you're being punished. So I really like to counsel women to start off with like a 12-12, which might be, eating for a 12-hour period of time, let's say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then you fast for, a complement, another 12 hours. You might tighten that up a touch. You might make it a 10-hour eating window and a 14-hour fast. And for most women, I would say that you would stay there. And there's certain times of your cycle, which I talk about in the Betty Body, where we are much more resilient to more aggressive fasts, like in your bleed week, for example, in your follicular phase in general, like the first 2 weeks of your cycle, you can do bigger fasts if you want. You can do the 24-hour, you can do, maybe you want to do like a 36-hour or 48-hour fast, but you don't want to be doing it all the time. And you want to understand the ebbs and flows of your hormonal milieu as you're moving through your cycle, which will help you dictate, how long is the fast, what kind of fast you're doing, and how frequently you're doing that fast. So the general rule of thumb here is women, we need to be less aggressive than like the guys can do 24, they can do a 24-hour fast like every day, and they have great results from it. We will lose our periods. We will be miserable and hungry. So I think it's important that we are just gentler on ourselves than the guys are.
Yeah, no, those are fantastic points. I mean, listen, we're on with Dr. Stephanie Estima, doctor of chiropractic and obviously functional neurology trained, just absolutely brilliant about nutrition. And, Dr. Stephanie, I could safely say, I love to make these comments to people like yourself. Like I would send any patient, I would recommend any person to consult with you versus any other medical doctor, who I've ever worked with. We get no training in anything you're talking about. Your book is absolutely outstanding as far as the range of coverage for younger women, for older women, maybe even for men to understand these women and how to be best supportive of these women. Because again, yeah, it's very easy for me to hear about some kind of new fasting strategy, and I go and turn it on my wife, hey, let's do this 72-hour fast. And my wife's like, I'm a 46-year-old nursing mother. You're an idiot. I'm not doing that. So again, like there's so much information in the book, The Betty Body. So Dr. Stephanie, tell me where people can get more information, because again, you've got such a wide range of knowledge and so much to offer, including to your children as their teacher and homeschool mother. Tell me again where everybody in my wheelhouse can find. And thank you again for the reference to the Bad News Bears. I don't think that's come up on the podcast, so I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate and I receive your compliments with joy and with love. So if you're somebody who wants to, find out more about me and my work, I think the best place to start is the book. So you can find that on Amazon. You can find it at Barnes and Noble, like it's everywhere. So you can find it at any online retailer. I think Walmart also has it now. And so you can find it there. And that's sort of a lower cost investment, like the book is, I don't know, $20, $25. You can kind of read through it. And then if you are wanting to know more or wanting to, go a level deeper, certainly we have my community, which we have a community of women where we meet at least once a week. Sometimes it's more for running a supplementary program, but we talk about all the different pillars of what it means to be a woman. So we talk about nutrition, and it's like female focused nutrition, female focused fitness, and fitness protocols. We talk about what it's like to be a woman, so the female psyche. We talk about the divine feminine, and how that marries with the divine masculine. There's these beautiful energies that I think that are, when we think about long-term health, one of the things I'll say is, we can talk about all the nutrition protocols, but, and if we want to optimize for longevity, but if you hate yourself, there's no point to living a long life. So how can we forgive ourselves? How can we practice self-care? How can we love ourselves a little bit more? So we have a community, it's called Hello Betty. So you can go to hellobetty.club. And then I also have a podcast as well. So, like you, I'm a podcast host, so it's called Better with Dr. Stephanie. So you can check us out there too.
Fantastic. So many different touch points. And again, you've got so much to offer to the world, health and wellness. So happy you came on the podcast. And again, thank you again. I'm Dr. Jack Wolfson, cardiologist. We finished up another episode of the Healthy Heart Show. Stay tuned for future episodes and guests. And again, best to you and living your 100-year heart. And as Dr. Stephanie would say, you want to live your 100-year heart, but you want to be happy while you're doing it. So make sure you focus on being happy. Happy people live longer and live better. So be well. Thank you.
That does it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Healthy Heart Show. Please help us get the word out by liking and subscribing to our podcast and our Facebook page, Natural Heart Doctor. Please show support for our podcast sponsor, Cardiology Coffee, your resource for organic, antioxidant-rich, mold and pesticide-free coffee shipped straight to your door. Learn more by adding @cardiologycoffee on Instagram and visiting cardiologycoffee.com. This podcast provides materials for information and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. We encourage you to contact your physician for any of the health issues discussed here.